Clara's back hit the barn wall so hard her vision blurred. Blood filled her mouth as Richard's fist connected again, then again. The knife gleamed in his other hand, and she knew this time he would finally kill her. 23 years of beatings had led to this moment. Her father's rage-twisted face filled her world as the blade rose high. Then the barn door exploded open. A tall cowboy stood silhouetted against the sunset, his eyes locking on the scene before him. In that split second, everything changed. Richard froze. Clara gasped for air. And the stranger's hand dropped to his gun, his voice cutting through the violence like thunder. "Step away from her, now!" Before we continue with Clara's story, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Clara didn't move. She'd learned years ago that moving only made it worse. "Get up," Richard snarled, but his voice had changed. He'd seen the stranger too. The cowboy stepped into the barn, and Clara could hear his boots on the packed earth, slow and deliberate. He was taller than her father, with shoulders that filled his worn denim shirt, and hands that looked like they could break a man in half, or hold something precious without crushing it. Clara didn't know why that second thought came to her, but it did. "Mr. Simmons," the stranger said. His voice was low, rough like gravel. "I'm Jake Carter. You hired me yesterday." Richard's hand dropped from his belt, and his face rearranged itself into something that might pass for civilized if you didn't look too close. "Carter. Right. You're early." "Habit of mine," Jake said. His eyes slid to Clara, still kneeling in the dirt, and stayed there just long enough for her to feel something shift in the air. Then he looked back at Richard. "Wanted to get started. You mentioned the fence line needed work." "It does." Richard grabbed Clara's arm and hauled her to her feet. She stumbled, and his grip tightened hard enough to bruise. "My daughter was just finishing up her morning chores. Weren't you, Clara?" "Yes, sir," Clara whispered. The words came automatically like breathing. Richard shoved her toward the barn door. "Go help your mother with breakfast. And wash your face. You look like hell." Clara moved, keeping her eyes down, but she felt Jake Carter's gaze follow her all the way out. She didn't dare look back. The kitchen was empty when Clara got there. Her mother Margaret was probably already in the garden, hiding among the tomato plants like she always did when Richard's temper flared. Clara went to the pump and worked the handle until cold water gushed out. She cupped her hands and splashed her face, watching pink-tinged water drip back into the basin. Her cheek throbbed. It would swell by tonight, probably bruise by tomorrow. She'd have to stay out of town for a few days. Again. "Clara." Her mother's voice came from the back door, small and worried. "I heard He's fine, Mama. He hired a new hand. Man named Carter." Margaret stepped into the kitchen, her thin frame wrapped in a faded apron. She'd been beautiful once. Clara could see it in old photographs back before she married Richard Simmons and learned what love cost in Ridgeview. "A new hand, Richard didn't tell me. When does he tell you anything?" Clara dried her face on a towel and turned around. Her mother's eyes went straight to her cheek, and her face crumpled. "Oh, Clara." "Don't, Mama. Please don't." Clara couldn't handle her mother's pity right now. She couldn't handle the way Margaret looked at her like she was already broken beyond repair. "I need to start breakfast." They worked in silence, Clara cracking eggs while Margaret sliced bread. The routine was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Outside, she could hear men's voices. Richard barking orders, Jake Carter's occasional response. The new hand didn't say much, but when he did speak, his voice carried a weight that made Clara want to hear more. "He seems different from the others," Margaret said quietly, reading Clara's mind the way mothers do. "The new man. They're all the same, Mama." Clara poured the eggs into the skillet, watching them sizzle and bubble. "They work for Father, they take his money, and they look the other way when it matters." "Maybe this one?" "No." Clara's voice was sharp. Don't do that to yourself." Margaret fell silent, and Clara immediately felt guilty. Her mother lived on maybes and what-ifs because she had nothing else left. Clara shouldn't take that away from her. The eggs were almost done when Richard's voice boomed from the yard. "Clara, get out here and bring water for the men." Clara closed her eyes briefly, then reached for the pitcher. "I'll do it," Margaret said, but Clara shook her head. "You know that'll just make him angrier." She filled the pitcher from the pump and grabbed 2 tin cups. "Keep the eggs warm." Outside, the morning sun was already brutal. Clara squinted against the glare as she walked toward the corral where Richard and Jake stood, examining a section of broken fence. Both men turned as she approached, and Clara kept her eyes on the ground the way she'd been taught. "Took you long enough," Richard said. "Carter, this is my daughter Clara. She'll bring you water and meals while you're working." Clara poured the man a drink. Clara's hands shook slightly as she filled one of the cups and held it out. She didn't look up, but she could feel Jake Carter's presence like heat from a forge. "Thank you, miss," Jake said, and his voice was different than before, softer, with something in it that made Clara's chest tighten. He took the cup, and his fingers brushed hers for just a second. The contact sent a jolt through her that she didn't understand. "Clara!" Richard's voice cracked like a whip. "Your face. What did I tell you about washing up?" "I did, sir." "Not well enough. You look like a common whore." Richard grabbed her chin and yanked her face toward him, his thumb pressing into the bruise he'd left earlier. Clara bit back a cry. "Get back to the house and make yourself presentable. We have a guest." Jake Carter went very still. Clara could see it from the corner of her eye, the way his whole body tensed, the way his hand tightened on the cup. For one wild moment, she thought he might say something, do something. But he didn't. Of course he didn't. Richard released her with a shove, and Clara stumbled back. Water sloshed from the pitcher onto her dress. "Go on, girl. Move." Clara turned and walked away, her face burning with shame that had nothing to do with the slap. Behind her, she heard Richard's voice loud and jovial. "Don't mind her, Carter. The girl's always been simple. Takes after her mother." She didn't hear Jake Carter's response. Maybe there wasn't one. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of chores. Clara cleaned the breakfast dishes, swept the floors, hauled water from the well, fed the chickens, and collected eggs. Her body moved through the familiar motions, while her mind stayed stuck on that moment in the barn, the way Jake Carter had looked at her, the way his presence had changed the air. It didn't matter. Nothing ever changed in Ridgeview, not for girls like Clara. By noon, the sun was merciless. Clara was in the root cellar counting potatoes for dinner when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy footsteps. A man's footsteps. She froze, her heart hammering. Richard rarely came down here. It was women's work beneath him. But sometimes when he was angry enough, when he wanted to make sure no one heard... Miss Simmons. Not Richard. Jake Carter. Clara straightened up, clutching a potato like a weapon. Jake stood at the bottom of the stairs, his hat in his hands, his face carefully neutral. "I didn't mean to startle you." "You shouldn't be here," Clara said quickly. "If Father finds you..." "Your father sent me. Asked me to check the cellar door hinges." Jake gestured to the door at the top of the stairs. "Said they were sticking." It was a lie. The hinges were fine. They'd been fine for years. Clara looked at Jake. Carter really looked at him for the first time. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Those eyes held something she couldn't name, something that made her want to trust him and run from him in equal measure. "The hinges are fine," she said. "I know." Jake took a step closer, and Clara's back hit the cellar wall, but he stopped giving her space. "Miss Simmons, what I saw this morning." "You didn't see anything." Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. "And even if you did, it's none of your concern." "Maybe not. But I don't like seeing women get hurt." "Then you're in the wrong town, Mr. Carter." Clara set the potato down with the others and started toward the stairs. And definitely working for the wrong man. Jake didn't move to let her pass. How long has he been hitting you? As the question landed like a physical blow. Clara stopped, her eyes stinging with sudden tears she refused to let fall. No one had ever asked her that before. Not in 23 years. Since always, she heard herself say. Since I can remember. And your mother? Her too. But mostly me now. I'm stronger than Mama. I can take it. Nobody should have to take it. Jake's voice was rough with anger, but Clara could tell it wasn't directed at her. There are laws. Not for men like Richard Simmons. Clara laughed, and it came out bitter. He owns half this town, Mr. Carter. The sheriff works for him. The judge plays cards with him every Saturday night. Who exactly do you think I'd complain to? Jake's jaw tightened. There has to be something. There isn't. There never has been. Now please let me pass. I have work to do. This time Jake stepped aside, but as Clara moved past him, he spoke again. My name's Jake, not Mr. Carter. Just Jake. Clara paused on the stairs, her hand on the railing. She didn't turn around. It doesn't matter what your name is. You'll be gone in a month, maybe 2. They always are. And I'll still be here. She climbed the stairs before he could respond, but his voice followed her anyway. Maybe. Or maybe things could be different. Clara didn't answer. She'd stopped believing in different a long time ago. Dinner was a tense affair. Richard sat at the head of the table holding court, while Margaret and Clara served the food. Jake Carter sat to Richard's right, eating quietly while Richard talked about cattle prices and fence repairs and the railroad coming through next spring. You married, Carter? Richard asked around a mouthful of roast beef. No, sir. Smart man. Women are nothing but trouble and expense. Richard laughed at his own joke. Margaret flinched, and Clara felt her hands tighten on the serving spoon. Though I suppose a man needs sons. Got to have someone to leave the ranch to. You don't have sons? Jake asked, his voice carefully neutral. Just the girl. Useless for anything except cooking and cleaning. Richard gestured at Clara with his fork. Should have married her off years ago, but no decent man wants damaged goods. Clara felt her face flush hot. Across the table, Margaret stared at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Your daughter seems plenty capable to me, Jake said quietly. The room went dead silent. Clara's eyes snapped to Jake's face, and she saw something dangerous there, something Richard must have seen too because his expression darkened. You've been here one day, Carter. Don't presume to tell me about my own blood. Wasn't presuming, sir. Just making an observation. Well, keep your observations to yourself. Richard shoved his plate away and stood up. I'm going to the saloon. Don't wait up, Margaret. He grabbed his hat and coat and stormed out the front door, slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, Clara could hear her mother's quick, frightened breathing. I should go check the horses, Jake said, standing up. His eyes met Clara's for just a second, and something passed between them, an apology maybe, or a promise. Then he was gone too. Margaret started crying. Quiet tears that slid down her cheeks and dropped onto the table. It's all right, Mama, Clara said automatically, even though it wasn't. Nothing was all right. Nothing had been all right for a very long time. He'll come back drunk, Margaret whispered. He'll be so angry, Clara. You need to hide. Go to the barn. Sleep in the loft. I'm not leaving you alone with him. Please. No, Mama, not anymore. Clara didn't know where the words came from, or the steel in her voice. But something had shifted in her today, starting with that moment in the barn when Jake Carter had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth protecting. Maybe things could be different, he'd said. Clara had spent years not believing in maybe. But tonight, for the first time in forever, she let herself wonder. Richard didn't come home that night. Clara and Margaret cleaned up dinner in silence, then retreated to their separate rooms. Clara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak around her. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the yard. Careful footsteps, trying to be quiet. Clara got up and moved to the window, peering through the thin curtains. In the moonlight, she could see Jake Carter walking toward the barn, a bedroll tucked under one arm. He must be sleeping out there in the loft, or one of the empty stalls. As if he felt her watching, Jake stopped and turned toward the house. For a long moment, they looked at each other across the distance, Clara in her window, Jake in the moonlit yard. Then Jake touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a small salute, and Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. She stepped back from the window and climbed back into bed, but sleep didn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible thought. What if things really could be different? What if she didn't have to spend the rest of her life being Richard Simmons's punching bag? What if... The sound of breaking glass shattered the night. Clara bolted upright, her heart racing. Downstairs, she heard her mother scream. Richard was home. Clara grabbed her robe and ran for the stairs, her feet flying over the wooden steps. She burst into the kitchen and froze. Richard stood in the middle of the room, swaying drunk, surrounded by broken dishes. Margaret cowered in the corner, blood running from a cut on her arm, where a shard had hit her. "There she is," Richard slurred, turning to face Clara. "My worthless daughter. Come to save your worthless mother." "Father, please, you're drunk. Let's get you to bed." "Don't tell me what to do!" Richard lunged for her, but he was too drunk to be coordinated. Clara dodged, and he crashed into the table. "Ungrateful bitch, after everything I've done for you. You've done nothing but hurt us." The words exploded out of Clara before she could stop them. "Nothing but make our lives hell." Richard's face went purple with rage. He grabbed a knife from the table, a big butcher knife that Margaret used for cutting meat. "You want to talk back to me? You want to disrespect me in my own house?" He started toward her, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that this time her father was going to kill her. The kitchen door exploded inward. Jake Carter filled the doorway, his hair wild, his chest heaving like he'd been running. His eyes swept the scene, Richard with the knife, Margaret bleeding, Clara trapped against the wall, and his face went hard as granite. "Put the knife down, Simmons." "Get out of my house, Carter. This is family business." "I said put it down." Jake took a step forward, and despite being drunk, Richard must have recognized the danger because he hesitated. "You pull that knife on a woman again, you're going to have to use it on me first." "You're fired," Richard snarled. "Fine. Put the knife down and I'll leave." For a moment, Clara thought her father might actually do it. But then Richard looked at her, looked at the fear in her eyes and smiled. "No," he said. "I don't think I will." He lunged for Clara, the knife aimed at her chest. Clara screamed, Margaret screamed, and Jake Carter moved faster than Clara thought possible. He was between them in a heartbeat, catching Richard's wrist and twisting hard. The knife clattered to the floor. Richard roared and swung his free hand, but Jake ducked and drove his fist into Richard's gut. The older man folded like paper, wheezing. Jake didn't stop. He grabbed Richard by the collar and hauled him toward the door, the drunk man's feet barely touching the ground. At the threshold, Jake stopped and looked back at Clara. "Pack your things," he said. "Both of you. You're leaving tonight." "We can't," Margaret started, but Jake cut her off. "You can't stay. Not now. He'll kill her when he sobers up." Jake's eyes locked with Clara's. "You want different, Miss Simmons? This is different, but you have to choose it." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything in her life had taught her to stay quiet, stay small, stay safe. But Jake Carter stood there, offering her something she'd never had before, a choice. "Mama," Clara said, not taking her eyes off Jake. "Go pack a bag, now." "Clara." "Now, Mama." Margaret scrambled up and ran for the stairs. Clara moved closer to Jake and her unconscious father. "Where will we go?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but anywhere is better than here." Clara looked down at Richard Simmons, the man who had terrorized her entire life, who had beaten her and broken her and tried to convince her she was worthless. In the moonlight streaming through the door, he looked small, pathetic. "Okay," Clara whispered. Then louder, "Okay, we'll go." Jake's face softened just for a second. "Get your things. I'll watch him." Clara ran upstairs, her mind racing. She threw clothes into a bag, grabbed her mother's jewelry box, and the little bit of money she'd saved from selling eggs. Her hands shook so badly, she could barely tie the bag closed. When she came back down, Margaret was already in the kitchen with her own small bag. Jake had dragged Richard outside and tied him to the porch railing like a dog. "He'll get free eventually," Jake said. "We need to be long gone by then." "Where?" Clara started, but Jake shook his head. "Not here. Talk while we ride." He looked at both women. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Clara said. "Then let's move." They hurried to the barn. Jake saddled 3 horses with quick, efficient movements, while Clara and Margaret stood watch. Every sound made Clara jump, every creak of wood, every rustle of wind. She kept expecting Richard to appear knife in hand, ready to finish what he started. But he didn't. And when Jake led the horses out into the moonlight, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "Ready?" Jake asked, offering her a hand up. Clara looked back at the house one last time, at the prison that had held her for 23 years. Then she looked at Jake Carter, this stranger who had risked everything for a woman he barely knew. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. Jake helped her mount, then her mother. He swung up onto his own horse and gathered the reins. "Stay close and stay quiet," he said. "We've got a long ride ahead." As they rode away from the Simmons ranch, Clara didn't look back. She kept her eyes forward on Jake's broad shoulders, on the road ahead, on the future she was choosing. Behind them, Richard Simmons's furious roar split the night. He'd gotten free, but it didn't matter anymore, because Clara Simmons was finally free too. They rode hard for the first hour, the horses' hooves pounding against the dirt road like thunder. Clara's arms ached from gripping the reins. Her thighs burned from holding herself steady in the saddle, but she didn't dare complain. Behind them, Richard's furious roars had faded into the night, but Clara could still feel him like a ghost pressed against her back, promising violence. "Jake." Margaret's voice cracked through the darkness. "Jake, I can't. I need to stop." Jake pulled his horse up sharp and Clara nearly crashed into him. Margaret was swaying in her saddle, her face white as bone in the moonlight. "Just a few more miles," Jake said. "We need distance." "She's bleeding," Clara said, pointing to Margaret's arm, where Richard's broken dish had cut her. The makeshift bandage Clara had tied was soaked through, dark and wet. "Jake, she needs help." Jake cursed under his breath and swung down from his horse. "All right, off the road into those trees. Quick and quiet." They led the horses into a small grove of cottonwoods, and Jake helped Margaret down. She collapsed against a tree trunk, her breath coming in short gasps. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. "I'm so sorry I'm slowing you down." "Hush, Mama." Clara knelt beside her mother and unwrapped the bandage. The cut was deeper than she'd thought, still bleeding steadily. "Jake, do you have anything?" "In my saddlebag. There's a flask of whiskey and some clean cloth." Jake was already moving, pulling supplies from his pack. "This is going to hurt, ma'am." "Everything hurts," Margaret said, and laughed a high, brittle sound that made Clara's chest tight. "What's a little more pain?" Jake poured whiskey over the wound, and Margaret bit down on her hand to keep from screaming. Clara held her mother steady, blinking back tears. When it was done, Jake wrapped the arm tight with clean cloth and tied it off. "That'll hold until we reach town," he said. "What town?" Clara asked. "We can't go to Ridgeview. Father owns everyone there." "Not Ridgeview. Silver Creek, about 30 miles north. I know a doctor there, man named Phillips. He'll help us." 30 miles. Margaret's voice was faint. "I can't ride 30 miles. "You can, and you will." Jake's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Because if we stay here, Richard Simmons will find us. And when he does, what happened tonight will look like mercy." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "He'll come after us." "Count on it." Jake stood up and checked the horses. "Man like that doesn't let go of what he thinks belongs to him. We've got maybe a 2-hour lead if we're lucky. Less if he sobers up quick." "Then we need to keep moving." Clara helped her mother to her feet. Margaret swayed, but she stayed upright. "Mama, can you ride?" "I have to." "Don't I—" Margaret's smile was weak but real. "For once in my life, I have to be strong." They mounted up again, and this time Jake set a slower pace. The night stretched around them, vast and dark, full of sounds Clara didn't recognize. She'd never been more than 10 miles from the ranch in her entire life. The world felt enormous and terrifying, and somehow impossibly full of promise. "Jake." Clara guided her horse closer to his. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I know enough." "That's not an answer." "No, I suppose it's not." Jake looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and unreadable. "I had a sister once, Emily. She was younger than me, prettier, smarter. She fell in love with the wrong man, a son of a bitch who smiled in church on Sunday and beat her black and blue the rest of the week." Clara's breath caught. "What happened to her?" "I found out too late." Jake's voice went flat, empty. "By the time I got there, by the time I understood what was happening, she was already gone. Threw herself off a bridge rather than face one more day with him." "Oh, Jake." "I should have seen it sooner. Should have done something. Anything." Jake's hands tightened on the reins. "I swore after she died that I'd never stand by again. Never watch a man hurt a woman and do nothing." "So you risked everything for strangers," Clara said softly. "You're not strangers anymore." Jake looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went deeper than words. "The moment I saw you on your knees in that barn, the moment I saw the fear in your eyes, you stopped being a stranger." Clara wanted to say something, but her throat was too tight. Instead, she reached out and touched Jake's arm just for a second. He covered her hand with his warm and solid and real. Behind them, Margaret made a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Clara and Jake pulled apart, but Clara could still feel the heat of his touch on her skin. They rode on. Dawn was breaking when they finally stopped to rest the horses. Jake led them to a small creek hidden by rocks and scrub brush. The water ran clear and cold, and Clara had never tasted anything so good in her life. "We'll rest here for an hour," Jake said, scanning the horizon. "Then push on to Silver Creek. We should make it by afternoon if we don't run into trouble." "If," Margaret repeated. She was sitting on a rock, her face gray with exhaustion. "That's not very reassuring, Mr. Carter. I'm not in the business of lying to you, ma'am. There's men who'd turn us in for a reward. Richard Simmons isn't poor, and he's not above buying loyalty." "Then what do we do?" Clara asked. "Even if we make it to Silver Creek, even if this doctor helps us, Father will just keep coming. He'll never stop." "Maybe not." Jake pulled out a piece of dried beef from his pack and handed it to Margaret. "But every mile we put between us and him is a mile of freedom. That's got to count for something." Clara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that freedom was possible, that she could have a life beyond Richard Simmons's fists and rage. But 23 years of experience told her different. "You think I'm foolish?" Jake said, reading her expression. "You think I'm some kind of romantic idiot who doesn't understand how the world works." "I think you're a good man trying to fix something that can't be fixed," Clara said quietly. "And I think we're going to get you killed. Let me worry about that." "How can I not worry?" Clara's voice rose, surprising herself. "You threw away your job, probably your reputation, maybe your life for what?" "For me, for some broken woman you met yesterday." "You're not broken." Jake's voice was fierce. "You're bent maybe, hurt, but not broken. If you were broken, you wouldn't have stood up to your father last night. You wouldn't be on this horse right now riding toward something better." "You don't know that it's better. I know it's different, and different is all we've got." Clara stared at him, her heart hammering. She wanted to argue, wanted to push him away, wanted to protect him from the disaster she was certain was coming. But she also wanted God help her. She wanted to believe him. "Clara," Margaret said softly. "Let him help us. Please." Clara looked at her mother, this woman who had spent 25 years bowing and scraping and apologizing for existing. Margaret's eyes held something Clara had never seen before: hope. "All right," Clara whispered. "All right." Jake's shoulders relaxed slightly. "We should eat something, get our strength up before—" The crack of a rifle shot split the morning air. All three of them hit the ground. Clara's heart exploded in her chest, her ears ringing from the shot. Another bullet whined overhead, striking a rock and sending chips flying. "Move!" Jake grabbed Clara's arm and hauled her toward the horses. "Margaret, come on!" But Margaret was frozen, her eyes wide with terror. Clara broke free from Jake and ran back, grabbing her mother's hand. "Mama, move now!" They scrambled toward the horses, but the shooting didn't stop. Whoever was firing had them pinned down, the horses spooked and dancing sideways. Jake managed to catch his mount's reins, but Clara's horse bolted, disappearing into the brush. "Damn it!" Jake pulled his own rifle from its scabbard and fired back into the rocks. "Ladies, stay down!" "Who is it?" Clara shouted over the gunfire. "Is it father?" "Don't know." Jake fired again. "Could be him. Could be bounty hunters. Doesn't matter right now." A voice rang out from the rocks, rough and familiar. "Carter! Jake! Carter! You son of a bitch!" Jake's face went white. "No, not him." "Who?" Clara demanded. "Jake, who is that?" "My brother," Jake said, and the word came out like a curse. "That's my goddamn brother." The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Clara could hear her own ragged breathing, her mother's quiet sobs. "Come on out, Jake," the voice called. "Let's talk about this like civilized men." "We've got nothing to talk about, Tommy." "Sure we do." Footsteps crunched on gravel, coming closer. "You've got something that belongs to Richard Simmons. Man's offering $500 for the safe return of his wife and daughter. 500, Jake. That's good money." Clara felt her blood turn to ice. "He sent your brother after us. Tommy would chase his own mother for $500. Jake's voice was bitter. "Stay behind me." A man emerged from the rocks, tall and lean, with Jake's dark hair, but none of his strength. Tommy Carter's face was sharp and hungry, his eyes calculating. Two other men flanked him, both armed. "There you are, big brother," Tommy grinned. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell. Go away, Tommy." "Can't do that. Got a job to do." Tommy's eyes slid to Clara and Margaret. "Ladies, your father's real worried about you. Sent me to bring you home safe and sound." "He's lying," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "Richard will kill us." "Now, ma'am, that's just fear talking. He tried to stab his own daughter." Margaret stood up, her injured arm hanging limp at her side. "He came at her with a butcher knife." Tommy's grin faltered. "Well, I'm sure there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Clara said, stepping forward despite Jake's warning hand. "My father is a violent drunk who beats women, and you're helping him." "I'm just doing a job, miss. Nothing personal." "It's personal to me." Clara's voice was steady now, cold and clear. "You take us back, he'll kill us. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And you'll have blood on your hands." Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't know anything about that." "Yes, you do." Jake lowered his rifle slightly. "You know exactly what kind of man Richard Simmons is, just like you knew what kind of man Emily's husband was." Tommy's face hardened. "Don't you bring Emily into this." "Why not? You never cared about her when she was alive. Why start now?" "I cared, things are complicated, Jake. You don't understand." "I understand you're about to make the same mistake twice." Jake's voice was low and dangerous. "You're about to help a monster hurt innocent women because it's easier than doing what's right. $500 isn't easy, it's smart." Tommy's desperation was showing now. "You think morality puts food on the table? Pays debts. I got people counting on me, Jake. I got responsibilities. So do I." Jake raised his rifle again. "And right now, my responsibility is making sure these women stay safe, even if that means going through you." The two brothers stared at each other across the creek, and Clara held her breath. She could see the resemblance now, the same strong jaw, the same broad shoulders. But where Jake's eyes held compassion, Tommy's held only hunger. "You'd shoot your own brother?" Tommy asked quietly. "If I have to." "For women you met yesterday. For what's right. For what I should have done for Emily. For everything I've been too late to do." Jake's voice didn't waver. "Last chance, Tommy. Walk away." Tommy looked at his brother, at the two women at his hired guns. Clara watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, weighing money against blood, greed against family. Finally, Tommy spat in the dirt. "You're making a mistake, Jake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. Richard Simmons won't stop. He'll send more men, better men, and 500 will turn into 1,000 and then 2,000. You can't outrun money, brother." "Maybe not, but I can try." Tommy shook his head, something like regret crossing his face. Then he signaled to his men, and they melted back into the rocks. Within seconds they were gone, like they'd never been there at all. Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the ground, her whole body shaking. Margaret rushed to her side, wrapping her good arm around Clara's shoulders. "It's all right," Margaret whispered. "We're all right." But Jake was still staring at the rocks where his brother had disappeared, his face unreadable. "We need to move, now. Tommy won't shoot me, but he'll follow us to Silver Creek and tell Richard exactly where we are." "Can we trust this doctor you mentioned?" Clara asked. "Can we trust anyone?" "Doc Phillips owes me his life. Saved him from a bar fight 5 years back." Jake started gathering their remaining supplies. "He'll help us, and he knows people who can get us further away. Maybe all the way to California." "California?" Margaret's voice was faint. "But that's so far." "That's the point, ma'am." Jake helped them both to their feet. "Far enough that Richard Simmons can't reach. Far enough to start over." Clara looked at the eastern horizon where the sun was climbing higher. Somewhere back there was Ridgeview, was the ranch, was every beating and bruise and broken promise of her entire life. And ahead was the unknown. Terrifying and vast and impossible. But standing between her and the past was Jake Carter, this man who'd lost his sister and found redemption in two strangers. This man who'd chosen right over easy, who'd faced down his own brother for people he barely knew. "All right," Clara said. "California it is." Jake's face softened just for a moment. Then he turned all business again, catching the two remaining horses and helping the women mount. They rode out fast, leaving the creek and Tommy's threats behind. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were riding towards something bigger than escape. Something that would test everything they were, everything they believed about themselves and each other. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the night's coolness. And Clara Simmons, for the first time in her life, rode toward the light instead of away from it. Silver Creek appeared through the heat shimmer like a mirage. Clara had been riding for 6 hours straight, her body numb, her mind spinning with exhaustion and fear. When Jake finally pulled up his horse at the edge of town, she nearly fell from the saddle. "Easy," Jake said, catching her arm. His hand was warm and steady, and Clara wanted to lean into him to let someone else carry the weight for just a moment. But she straightened up instead. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Neither of you are." Jake looked at Margaret, who was barely conscious, slumped forward on her horse. "We need to get your mother to Doc Phillips now." They rode down the main street, and Clara felt eyes on them, townspeople staring from porches and shop windows. She knew what they saw, two dirty, exhausted women and a grim-faced cowboy, all of them looking like they'd ridden through hell. "Where's the doctor?" Clara asked. "End of the street, White House with the green shutters." Jake was already guiding them that way. "Hold on, Margaret. Just a little longer." But Margaret's eyes rolled back and she started to slide sideways. Clara lunged for her, but Jake was faster, catching Margaret before she hit the ground. He held her in his arms like she weighed nothing. "Clara, get the door." Clara jumped down and ran to the White House, pounding on the door hard enough to bruise her knuckles. "Help, please, we need help." The door opened, and a gray-haired man with kind eyes looked out. He took one look at Jake holding Margaret and stepped aside. "Inside, quickly." They followed him into a small examination room. Jake laid Margaret on a table, and the doctor Phillips Clara assumed started cutting away the bloody bandage on Margaret's arm. "What happened here?" Phillips asked, his voice calm and professional. "Knife wound," Jake said. "Last night. I cleaned it and wrapped it, but she's been riding hard. I can see that." Phillips pressed his fingers to Margaret's neck, checking her pulse. "She's lost blood. How long ago?" 12 hours, maybe more." Phillips looked up at Jake, and something passed between them. Recognition, memory, old debts. "You're in trouble again, Jake Carter. Always am, Doc. Who's after you this time?" "Richard Simmons, from Ridgeview." Phillips's hands stilled. "The rancher Christ, Jake, you don't pick easy fights." "Didn't pick it. It picked me." Jake glanced at Clara. "This is his daughter Clara. That's his wife Margaret." "Former wife," Clara said, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. "We're not his anything anymore." Phillips studied her face, and Clara saw him notice the bruises, the split lip, the way she held herself, like someone expecting a blow. His expression hardened. "I see. Well, let's get your mother patched up proper, and then we'll talk about what comes next." He turned to a cabinet and pulled out bottles and instruments. "Miss Clara, I'm going to need you to hold her hand. This will hurt, and she might wake up screaming." Clara moved to her mother's side and gripped her hand. Margaret's skin was cold and clammy, her breathing shallow. "Is she going to be all right?" "If infection hasn't set in, we'll know soon enough." Phillips poured something clear over the wound, and Margaret jerked awake with a strangled cry. "Mama, I'm here. I'm right here. Clara." Margaret's eyes were unfocused, wild with pain. Where are we?" "Silver Creek. You're safe. The doctor's helping you." "Richard. He's not here. He can't hurt you anymore." "You don't know that." Margaret tried to sit up, but Phillips pushed her back down. "You don't know he'll find us. He always finds—" "Ma'am, you need to stay still," Phillips said firmly. "I'm trying to save your arm. Let him take it. Let him take everything." Margaret was sobbing now, thrashing weakly. "It doesn't matter. Richard always wins, always." "He doesn't win this time," Clara said, and she was shocked by the steel in her own voice. "This time, we win, Mama. We get away. We live." Margaret stared at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. Then she went limp, unconscious again. Phillips worked quickly stitching and bandaging, while Clara held her mother's hand and tried not to cry. "She'll sleep now," Phillips said finally, wiping his hands on a towel. "Fever will come tonight probably. If she makes it through that, she'll recover." "If," Clara's voice cracked. "I'm not going to lie to you, Miss Clara. She's weak. The infection's already starting. But she's got something to fight for now, and that counts for more than medicine sometimes." Phillips looked at Jake. "You planning to tell me what happened?" Jake did, keeping his voice low and steady. He told Phillips about finding Clara in the barn, about the confrontation with Richard, about the escape and Tommy's ambush. Through it all, Clara stood silent, watching her mother's chest rise and fall. When Jake finished, Phillips let out a long breath. "You've really stepped in it this time, son." "I know. Richard Simmons has reach, money, friends in high places." "I know that too." "Then you know he'll come here. Might already be on his way." Clara's head snapped up. "How long do we have?" "A day if you're lucky. Less if Tommy rode straight back to tell him where you went." Phillips pulled a pocket watch from his vest and checked it. "It's 2 in the afternoon now. If I were you, I'd rest until dark, then ride out. Head west toward the mountains. There's an old mining camp up there abandoned for years. You could hole up, wait for things to cool down." "How long will things take to cool down?" Clara asked. "A week? A month?" "Try never," Phillips said bluntly. "Men like Richard Simmons don't forget. They don't forgive. You run now, you'll be running the rest of your lives." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She looked at Jake, saw the truth in his face. He'd known. He'd known all along that saving them meant destroying his own life, and he'd done it anyway. Why? The word burst out of Clara before she could stop it. Why would you do this? Why would you sacrifice everything for us? Jake met her eyes, and Clara saw something raw and honest there. Because Emily didn't get a choice. Because she died thinking nobody cared enough to save her. Because I was too late for her, but I'm not too late for you. That's not... Clara's voice broke. That's not a reason to ruin your life. Maybe not, but it's my reason, and it's good enough for me. Jake turned to Phillips. Can you keep Margaret safe until we figure out what to do next? I can try. But Jake, you need to understand if Richard comes here looking for them, if he threatens my family. You tell him everything. You tell him where we went, what we said, all of it. I won't ask you to risk your family for mine. Clara's throat tightened. Mine. Jake had called them his family. Phillips nodded slowly. All right, I'll keep her comfortable. But you two need to disappear for a few hours. If Richard shows up and finds you here, it'll be a bloodbath. Where should we go? Clara asked. There's a church at the north end of town. Pastor Morrison's a good man, discreet. Tell him I sent you. Phillips walked them to the door. And Jake, be careful. Richard Simmons doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. They left Margaret sleeping and walked toward the church. The afternoon sun was brutal, and Clara's head pounded with exhaustion. Halfway there, her legs gave out. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. When's the last time you ate? I don't remember. Jesus, Clara. Jake looked around, spotted a small restaurant across the street. Come on, food first, then the church. We don't have time. We don't have a choice. You're dead on your feet. Jake put his arm around her waist, supporting her weight. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. The restaurant was empty except for an old woman behind the counter. She took one look at them and brought out bread and soup without being asked. Clara ate mechanically, tasting nothing, but her body responded to the food with desperate gratitude. Better? Jake asked. A little. Clara looked at him across the table. Jake, if my father comes, if there's a fight, promise me you won't do anything stupid. Like what? Like dying for me. Jake's expression went soft. Can't promise that, Clara. Why not? Because some things are worth dying for. And you're one of them. Clara's eyes stung with sudden tears. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you stood up to your father when you could have just taken it. I know you protected your mother when you could have saved yourself. I know you're stronger than you think you are. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. And I know I'm not letting you go back to that hell. Not now. Not ever. His hand was rough and calloused and warm, and Clara held on like it was the only solid thing in a world turning upside down. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you're smart enough to understand the danger. But Clara, listen to me, being scared doesn't mean being helpless. You've already proven that. Have I? Because I feel pretty damn helpless right now. You're not. You're tired and hurt and running, but you're not helpless. You made a choice last night. You chose freedom. That's power, even if it doesn't feel like it. Clara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that she had power, that she was more than just Richard Simmons's punching bag. But 23 years of conditioning was hard to shake. What if we can't outrun him? She asked quietly. What if he catches us? Then we fight. With what? You've got one rifle and a couple pistols. He'll bring an army. Maybe, but armies can be beaten. David beat Goliath with a sling and a stone, remember? This isn't the Bible, Jake. This is real life, and in real life, monsters usually win. Jake's grip on her hand tightened. Not this time. This time the monster loses. I'll make sure of it. Before Clara could respond, the door burst open. A young boy ran in, his face flushed with excitement. Mr. Carter! Mr. Carter! You need to come quick! Jake was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? It's Dr. Phillips. There's men at his house, lots of them, and they've got guns. Clara's blood turned to ice. Father! They ran. Clara's exhaustion vanished, replaced by pure terror. They burst through Philip's front door to find the doctor standing in his examination room with his hands raised. 3 men stood around him, all armed. And sitting in a chair like he owned the place was Richard Simmons. Clara's father looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His face was purple with rage and alcohol. His clothes stained and wrinkled. But his eyes were clear and cold and full of murder. "There she is," Richard said softly. "My ungrateful daughter." Jake stepped in front of Clara, his hand on his gun. "Get out, Simmons. Or what, you'll shoot me in front of witnesses." Richard laughed. "I don't think so, Carter. You're not that stupid." "Try me. I'd rather not. Rather just take back what's mine and leave you alive to regret interfering." Richard stood up slowly. "Clara, Margaret, come here. Now." "No," Clara said. Her voice shook, but the word was clear. Richard's face darkened. "What did you say to me?" "I said no. I'm not going back. Neither is Mama." "You don't have a choice, girl. You're my daughter. You're my property, and I'm taking you home." "She's not property," Jake said. "She's a human being with rights." "Rights." Richard spat the word like poison. "I'll tell you about rights. I have the right to discipline my own family. I have the right to run my household as I see fit, and I have the right to take back what a thieving cowboy stole from me in the night." "You hit her with a belt," Jake said quietly. "You came at her with a knife. That's not discipline, that's attempted murder. Prove it." "I don't have to. Look at her face. Look at the bruises." Richard shrugged. "She fell. Clumsy girl always was. Isn't that right, Clara?" Clara felt the familiar response rising in her throat, the automatic agreement, the trained submission. But then she felt Jake's presence beside her, solid and unwavering. And she remembered her mother lying unconscious in the next room fighting for her life because she'd finally chosen to fight back. "No," Clara said again, louder this time. "I didn't fall. You hit me. You've been hitting me my whole life, and I'm done pretending it's normal." Richard's men shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a young guy who couldn't be more than 20, looked sick. "Mr. Simmons, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Richard rounded on him. "I'm paying you to back me up, not question me." "You're paying them to help you kidnap your daughter," Jake said. "That's a crime, boys. You could hang for that." The young guy's face went white. "I don't want no part of kidnapping." "Then leave," Clara said, looking right at him. "Walk away. Don't let him turn you into a monster too." For a moment, she thought it might work. The young guy was wavering his hand, dropping away from his gun. But then Richard pulled out a wad of bills. $500, he said. "To the man who brings my daughter to my horse. 300 each for the rest of you if you keep Carter busy." The young guy's eyes locked on the money. Clara watched the decision happen on his face, morality versus greed, right versus easy. And she knew which way it would go even before he reached for her. Jake's fist connected with the guy's jaw before he got within 3 feet. The kid went down hard, and suddenly everyone was moving. Richard's other 2 men drew their guns. Jake pulled his, and Phillips dove for cover behind his desk. "Stop!" Clara screamed. "Please, just stop!" But nobody stopped. One of Richard's men fired, and the bullet punched through the wall inches from Jake's head. Jake returned fire, and the man went down clutching his shoulder. The room filled with gun smoke and shouting. Through the chaos, Clara saw her father moving toward the back room where Margaret lay sleeping. He had a gun in his hand. "Jake," Clara pointed. "He's going for Mama." Jake turned to follow Richard, but the 3rd gunman blocked his path. They grappled, crashing into Phillips's cabinet and sending bottles and instruments flying. Clara didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from Phillips's desk and ran after her father. Richard was standing over Margaret's unconscious form when Clara burst in. He had his gun pointed at Margaret's head. "Don't," Clara said. "Please, Father, don't. Give me one good reason. Because she's your wife. Because you married her and promised to love her." "Love?" Richard's laugh was ugly. "I never loved her. She was just a broodmare who couldn't even give me sons. Just one worthless daughter. The words should have hurt. They would have hurt yesterday, last week, any time before Clara had chosen to run. But now they just made her angry. "If I'm so worthless," Clara said, raising the candlestick, "then why do you want me back?" "Because you're mine, and nobody takes what's mine." "I was never yours. I was just trapped." Clara took a step closer. "But I'm not trapped anymore." Richard swung the gun toward her. "Put that down, Clara. Don't make me shoot my own daughter. You were going to kill me last night anyway." "That was different. I was drunk. But right now I'm stone cold sober, and I'm telling you, put it down." Clara's hands tightened on the candlestick. Behind her, she could hear Jake fighting Phillips, shouting, guns firing. The whole world had narrowed down to this moment, her father with his gun, her with her makeshift weapon, and her mother's life hanging in the balance. "No," Clara said. Richard's finger tightened on the trigger, and Clara threw the candlestick with every ounce of strength she had. It hit Richard squares in the forehead with a sickening crack. His gun went off the bullet, going wild, and he staggered backward. Clara lunged for the gun, but Richard was faster despite his injury. He backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling. "You little bitch!" Richard loomed over her, blood streaming from his forehead. "I should have drowned you when you were born." He raised the gun again, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that he was going to pull the trigger, that she was going to die on the floor of a stranger's house, having tasted freedom for less than a day. The door exploded inward, and Jake Carter was there. He didn't hesitate, didn't warn, didn't give Richard a chance to surrender. He just fired. The shot was deafening in the small room. Richard jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He looked down at it, then at Clara, then at Jake. His expression was one of pure disbelief. "You shot me," he said. "You actually shot me." "You were about to kill her," Jake said. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. Richard laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "Doesn't matter. I'm not the only one who'll come for her. There'll be others, always others. She'll never be free of me." He took one step toward Clara, then another. Jake fired again, but Richard kept coming, his face twisted with rage and madness. He reached for Clara's throat and collapsed at her feet, dead before he hit the ground. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara stared at her father's body, unable to process what had just happened. Richard Simmons, the monster, who had defined every day of her life, was dead. Gone. Finished. "Clara." Jake's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Clara, are you hurt?" She looked up at him, this man who had killed for her, and felt something break open inside her chest. "He's dead." "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't want to. I had to." "He's dead," Clara repeated, and then she started laughing. It was a horrible sound, half sobs and half hysteria, but she couldn't stop. "He's dead and we're alive and he can't hurt us anymore." Jake pulled her to her feet and into his arms, and Clara buried her face in his chest and cried. Not sad tears released tears, freedom tears. Tears for every beating she'd survived, every cruel word she'd endured, every moment she'd thought she'd die under Richard Simmons' fists. "It's over," Jake murmured into her hair. "It's over, Clara. You're safe now." And for the first time in her life, Clara believed it. Phillips appeared in the doorway, his face gray with shock. "Jake, what have you done?" "What I had to." Jake's arms were still around Clara, but his eyes were on Richard's body. He was going to kill her. "I know that. I saw it. But that doesn't change the fact that you just shot Richard Simmons in my examination room." Phillips ran his hands through his hair. "The sheriff will be here any minute. Someone will have heard those shots." Clara pulled away from Jake, wiping her eyes. "Then we'll tell him the truth. My father attacked me. Jake defended me. That's self-defense." "Is it?" Phillips looked at her. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a cowboy shot, a respected rancher over a domestic dispute. You think the law cares about the truth when money's involved?" "The doctor's right," came a voice from the front room. The young gunman Jake had punched was sitting up, holding his jaw. Mr. Simmons had friends, important friends. They'll hang you for this, Carter." "Let them try," Jake said. But Clara heard the uncertainty in his voice. "We need to leave," she said. "Right now, before the sheriff." Too late. Phillips was looking out the window. "He's already here." Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. She looked at Jake, saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. "What do we do?" "We tell the truth," Jake said, "and we hope it's enough." The sheriff was a big man with a thick mustache and cold eyes. He took one look at Richard's body and let out a low whistle. "Well, hell. That's Richard Simmons, all right. Deader than a doornail." "Sheriff Morrison," Phillips said. I can see what there's been, Doc." Morrison turned to Jake. "You, Carter, the one who did this?" "Yes, sir." "He was defending me." Clara stepped forward. "My father was going to shoot me. Jake saved my life." Morrison looked at her bruised face, then at Margaret's unconscious form in the other room, then back at Richard's body. "That's so." "It is," Phillips said. "I saw the whole thing. Richard Simmons came in here with armed men, threatened his wife and daughter, and went for his gun. Carter acted in defense of Miss Clara's life." "And these other fellows?" Morrison gestured to Richard's men. One was on the floor with a shoulder wound. The other two looked ready to bolt. "They'll tell you the same," Jake said quietly, "if they're smart." The young gunman nodded quickly. "It's true, Sheriff. Mr. Simmons went crazy. Started waving his gun around, threatening to kill his own daughter. Carter tried to talk him down, but he wouldn't listen." "That right." Morrison looked at the other two men. They both nodded, not meeting his eyes. Morrison pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. "Interesting, because I got a telegram this morning from Ridgeview. Said Richard Simmons' wife and daughter were kidnapped by a drifter named Jake Carter. Said there was a $500 reward for their safe return." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Morrison's eyes were sharp. "Because from where I'm standing it looks like you ran off with this man, and when your father came to bring you home, Carter shot him dead. He beat us." Clara's voice rose. "He beat my mother and me for years. Last night he came at me with a knife and tried to kill me. We ran because we had no choice. You got proof of that. Look at my face. Look at my mother's arm. I see bruises and a cut. Could have happened lots of ways." Morrison closed his notebook. "Jake Carter, I'm arresting you for the murder of Richard Simmons." "No!" Clara grabbed the sheriff's arm. "Please, you don't understand." "I understand just fine, miss. Your father's dead, and this man killed him. That's murder in the eyes of the law. It was self-defense. That's for a judge to decide." Morrison pulled out handcuffs. "Carter, hands out." Jake looked at Clara, and something passed between them, an apology, a promise, a goodbye. Then he held out his hands. "Don't," Clara whispered. "Jake, please don't. It'll be all right." Jake's voice was steady, even as the cuffs clicked shut. "The truth will come out. The truth doesn't matter." Clara was crying again, but these were different tears, tears of rage and helplessness. "Don't you understand? They'll hang you anyway, because my father had money, and you're nobody. Then I'd die knowing I saved you. That's enough." "It's not enough for me." Morrison pulled Jake toward the door, but before they got there, a woman's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Wait!" Everyone turned. Margaret stood in the doorway of the examination room, swaying on her feet, her face white as paper. Phillips moved to help her, but she waved him off. "Mrs. Simmons," Morrison said, "you should be resting." "I'll rest when I'm dead." Margaret's voice was weak but clear. "And I'll be dead before I let you hang an innocent man for saving my daughter's life. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but do you understand what it's like to spend 25 years married to a monster, to watch him break your daughter piece by piece and know you're too weak to stop him?" Margaret took a step forward, and Clara saw steel in her mother's spine that had never been there before. "Richard Simmons was going to kill Clara last night. He came at her with a butcher knife. Mr. Carter stopped him. We ran. And when Richard found us here, he tried to finish what he started. That's your version, Morrison said. Richard's men tell a different story. Richard's men are liars. Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. They worked for him. They'd say anything for money. Actually, ma'am, the young gunman said quietly, we already told the sheriff the truth. Mr. Simmons went crazy. Carter was defending your daughter. Morrison's jaw tightened. You boys changing your story now. We never changed it, Sheriff. You just didn't want to hear it. The kid stood up, still holding his jaw. I don't know what that telegram said, but it's garbage. We saw what happened. Richard Simmons was trying to murder his own daughter, and Jake Carter stopped him. That's not murder. That's justice. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Morrison sighed and unlocked Jake's handcuffs. Against my better judgment, I'm letting you go, Carter, but don't leave town. Judge Anderson will be here in 2 days to review the case. If he decides it wasn't self-defense, you'll hang. Understood, Jake said, rubbing his wrists. And you, Mrs. Simmons. Morrison turned to Margaret. You'll need to give a statement. Detailed. Everything that happened. I will. Gladly. Morrison looked around the room one last time at Richard's body, at the blood on the floor, at the faces of everyone involved. This is a mess. A goddamn mess. He pointed at Phillips. Get that body to the undertaker. And you three, he gestured at Richard's men. Get out of my town. Now. The men scrambled for the door. When they were gone, Morrison tipped his hat to Margaret. Ma'am, Miss Carter. Then he left too. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw a different woman than the one who'd spent 25 years hiding in the garden. Margaret stood tall despite her injury, despite her exhaustion, despite everything. Mama, Clara whispered, you stood up to him, to the sheriff. I stood up for you, for us, for the truth. Margaret swayed again, and this time she let Phillips help her to a chair. I should have done it years ago. You did it when it mattered most, Jake said quietly. That takes courage. Courage? Margaret laughed bitterly. I was a coward for 25 years. One moment of courage doesn't erase that. It does to me, Clara said. She knelt beside her mother's chair and took her hand. You saved Jake's life just now. You saved all of us. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Is he really dead, Richard? Yes, Mama, he's really dead. Good. The word came out fierce and final. Good. May he rot in hell for what he did to us. Clara had never heard her mother speak with such venom. It should have shocked her, but instead it made her want to cheer. Phillips cleared his throat. I need to get the undertaker. And Margaret, you need to lie down before you collapse again. I'll help her, Clara said, but Margaret shook her head. No, you stay with Jake. I'll manage. Clara watched Phillips help her mother back to the examination room. When they were alone, she turned to Jake. You almost went to jail for me. Almost doesn't count. You could still hang. In 2 days when the judge comes. Then we'll deal with it in 2 days. Jake pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean against him. She could feel his heart beating strong and steady. For now we're alive and free and together. That's enough. Is it because I feel like we traded one nightmare for another? Before it was my father. Now it's the law. The law's different. The law can be reasoned with. Your father couldn't. Jake tilted her chin up so she had to look at him. Clara, we're going to get through this. I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. And then he kissed her. It was nothing like Clara had imagined a first kiss would be. It wasn't gentle or romantic or sweet. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like gunpowder and tears. But it was real, and it was theirs, and Clara kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. I should probably apologize for that. Don't you dare. Clara's voice was breathless. Don't you dare apologize for the one good thing in this entire nightmare. Then I won't. But Clara, You need to know if the judge decides against me, if they decide to hang me anyway. Stop, don't talk like that. I have to. Because if the worst happens, I need you to promise me you'll keep going. Keep fighting. Build a life worth living. Not without you. Especially without me. Jake's hands framed her face. You're stronger than you know. Strong enough to survive your father, strong enough to run, strong enough to stand in front of the sheriff and demand justice. You don't need me to be free, Clara. You just need yourself. That's where you're wrong, Clara said fiercely. I need you. Not to be free, you're right, I can do that myself. But to be happy. To believe there's good in this world. To remember what it feels like to be seen as something other than damaged goods. Jake's eyes were suspiciously bright. You're killing me, woman. Good. Because you've been killing me since the moment you walked into that barn. Clara kissed him again, softer this time. So we're even. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the wreckage of Phillips's examination room. Richard Simmons's blood drying on the floor beside them. It should have felt wrong, should have felt sick and twisted. But instead, it felt like the first honest thing Clara had experienced in her entire life. The front door opened, and a man in a black suit entered. The undertaker, Clara assumed. He took one look at Richard's body and pulled out a measuring tape. I'll need to build a coffin, he said matter-of-factly. Won't be ready until tomorrow. That's fine, Philip said, emerging from the examination room. Just get him out of my house. The undertaker and his assistant wrapped Richard in a sheet and carried him out. Clara watched them go and felt nothing. No grief, no relief, nothing. Just a vast emptiness where her father had lived in her head for 23 years. You all right? Jake asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Happy maybe, or at least relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Takes time to process this kind of thing. How would you know? Jake was quiet for a moment. When Emily died, I didn't feel anything for weeks. Just walked around in a fog going through the motions. Then one day I was riding through a canyon and I saw these wildflowers growing out of a crack in the rocks. Just this little burst of color in all that gray stone. And I broke down crying. Because I realized Emily would never see wildflowers again. Would never see anything again. Clara's throat tightened. What did you do? I picked one of the flowers and put it on her grave. And I promised her I'd never let fear stop me from doing what's right, even if it cost me everything. Jake looked at her. That's why I helped you, Clara. That's why I'd do it again, knowing how it turned out. Before Clara could respond, the door burst open again. This time it was Tommy Carter, and he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman Clara had never seen before, tall and elegant with cold eyes and a harder face. Well, well, Tommy said. Heard there was some excitement at the Doc's place. Figured I'd come see for myself. Get out, Tommy, Jake said. Can't do that, brother. See, I've got a business proposition for you. Tommy gestured to the woman. This here is Evelyn Simmons, Richard's sister. She's come a long way to discuss her brother's estate. Clara's blood ran cold. She'd forgotten Richard had family beyond Ridgeview. What does his estate have to do with us? Evelyn stepped forward, and Clara saw where Richard had gotten his cruelty. It was written in every line of Evelyn's face. Everything dear. You see my brother's ranch, his money, his property, it all goes to his next of kin, which would be his wife and daughter, which would be you. I don't want it, Clara said immediately. Of course you don't, because you're young and stupid and don't understand how the world works. Evelyn's smile was sharp as a knife. But I understand, and I'm prepared to make you an offer. Sign over your inheritance to me, and I'll make sure the judge rules in Mr. Carter's favor. Jake stiffened beside Clara. You can't do that. Can't I? Judge Anderson is an old friend of the family, very susceptible to suggestions from wealthy widows. Evelyn pulled out a document from her bag. All you have to do is sign, Clara dear. Give me what's rightfully mine anyway, and your cowboy lives. Refuse, and he hangs. That's extortion, Phillips said. That's business. Evelyn laid the document on the desk. You have until the judge arrives tomorrow. Sign or watch your lover die. She swept out Tommy, following behind her. At the door, Tommy looked back at Jake. Sorry, brother, but 500 from Richard plus whatever Evelyn's paying me, that's too good to pass up. When they were gone, Clara picked up the document with shaking hands. It was all there. Every piece of property, every dollar, every asset Richard had accumulated through years of cruelty and exploitation. And all she had to do to save Jake was give it up. Don't, Jake said. Don't even think about it. How can I not think about it? It's your life, Jake. It's your future, your security, your chance to build something good out of all that suffering. What good is money if you're dead? Clara's voice broke. What good is any of it without you? You'll find someone else. I don't want someone else. Clara threw the document across the room. I want you, you stubborn fool. I want you alive and here and with me. Jake pulled her into his arms again, and Clara felt him trembling. I can't let you give up everything for me. Why not? You were willing to give up everything for me. That's different. How? Because I had nothing to lose. But you could have a real life, Clara. A good life. Money, property, freedom. Everything you've ever wanted. All I've ever wanted was to be safe, to be loved, to matter to someone. Clara looked up at him through tears. And I have all that with you. So what do I care about Richard Simmons' blood money? Jake's control finally cracked. He buried his face in her hair and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world coming apart. What am I going to do with you? Love me, Clara whispered. That's all. Just love me. I already do. God help me, I already do. They stayed like that until the sun set and the room grew dark. And when Margaret emerged from the examination room, moving slow but steady, she found them still holding each other. Two people who'd found something worth fighting for in the wreckage of their lives. We need a plan, Margaret said quietly. Evelyn Simmons won't stop with extortion. She'll find other ways to hurt us if we don't give her what she wants. Then we don't give her what she wants, Clara said. She pulled away from Jake, wiping her eyes. We fight. Like we've been fighting. Like we'll keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. Against Evelyn, against the law, against everyone who wants to see us punished for daring to escape. Margaret's voice was tired. Clara, maybe we should just sign the papers, take whatever we can carry and disappear. Start over somewhere new. No. Clara's voice was hard. I'm done running. I'm done letting people like Richard and Evelyn Simmons take what they want and leave us with nothing. This ends now. How? Jake asked. How do we fight someone who owns the judge? Clara thought about it. About Evelyn's cold eyes and Tommy's greed and the sheriff's reluctance. About the young gunman who'd told the truth even when it was easier to lie. About her mother standing up to the sheriff. About Jake risking everything for a stranger. We tell the truth, she said finally. To everyone, the whole town. We tell them exactly what Richard Simmons was. What he did to us. What he would have kept doing if Jake hadn't stopped him. We make it so public, so loud that even Evelyn's money can't silence it. That could backfire, Phillips warned. Could turn the whole town against you. Or it could turn them for us. Clara looked at each of them in turn. It's a risk, but it's the only chance we have. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, let's do it. Let's tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Jake smiled the first real smile Clara had seen from him since Richard died. You Simmons women are going to be the death of me. Or the saving of you, Clara said, and kissed him one more time before the fight began. The church was packed. Clara stood at the front, her hands trembling, looking out at what seemed like half of Silver Creek. Word had spread fast, the Simmons women were going to speak, and people wanted to hear it. You don't have to do this, Jake whispered beside her. He'd insisted on standing with her despite Philip's warnings that it might hurt their case. Yes, I do. Clara squeezed his hand once, then stepped forward. Thank you all for coming. I know most of you didn't know my father, but you need to hear what kind of man Richard Simmons really was." "We know what kind of man he was," a voice called from the back. Clara recognized one of Richard's poker buddies from Ridgeview. He was a respected rancher and a pillar of his community. He was a monster who beat his wife and daughter for 25 years. Clara said, her voice steady. "And I have the scars to prove it." She unbuttoned her sleeve and rolled it up, showing the crowd the burns and old bruises that lined her arm. A woman in the front row gasped. Clara rolled up the other sleeve, then pulled down her collar to show the marks on her neck where Richard had choked her 2 months ago. "This is what respect looks like in the Simmons household," Clara said. "This is what my father did when I burned his eggs, or spoke without permission, or looked at him wrong." "That could be from anything," the poker buddy shouted. "Could be from that cowboy standing next to you." "Jake Carter has never laid a hand on me except to protect me," Clara said. "But if you don't believe me, maybe you'll believe my mother." Margaret stood up from her seat in the front row. She was still weak, still pale, but she walked to the front with her head high. She didn't say anything at first. She just unbuttoned her dress and let it fall to her waist. The crowd went silent. Margaret's back was a road map of scars, long white lines from belt buckles, round burns from cigars marks that could only have come from years of systematic abuse. Some of the women started crying. "This is my marriage," Margaret said quietly. 25 years of this. And my daughter got worse because she tried to protect me. Because she was young and strong and could take more punishment than I could. "Why didn't you leave?" someone called out. "Why didn't you tell someone?" "I tried. Once. When Clara was 5. Margaret's voice shook. "The sheriff in Ridgeview told me to go home and be a better wife. Richard broke 3 of my ribs that night and told me if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill our daughter in front of me." The church erupted in angry murmurs. Clara saw faces changing, skepticism turning to horror, doubt turning to outrage. "That's a convenient story?" The poker buddy was desperate now. "You two are just trying to justify murder. Richard Simmons is dead because that cowboy shot him." "Jake Carter shot my father because my father was about to shoot me," Clara said. "And I'll testify to that under oath. So will my mother. So will Dr. Phillips, who witnessed it. So will the 3 men my father hired who were there. Bought testimony, all of it." "Then let's talk about the telegram," Jake said, speaking for the first time. "The one that said I kidnapped Clara and Margaret. The one that offered $500 for their return. Why would a man offer money for kidnap victims unless he wanted to silence them before they could talk? Because they're his family. Family he was willing to kill," Clara shot back. "Family he terrorized for decades. Tell me something, any of you who knew my father. Did you ever see him be kind, gentle, loving? Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. Finally, a woman near the middle stood up. She was older, gray-haired, with kind eyes. "I met Richard Simmons once, at the general store in Ridgeview. Your mother was with him, Clara. She was buying flour and she accidentally dropped the bag. It split open, spilled everywhere. Richard grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out of the store. Called her stupid, worthless, every name you can think of. The store owner tried to intervene, and Richard threatened to burn his shop down. That's not—" The poker buddy started, but the woman cut him off. "I'm not finished. I wanted to help Margaret, but my husband told me to stay out of it. Said Richard Simmons was too powerful, too connected. That interfering would only make things worse." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I've regretted my silence for 15 years. I won't be silent now." Another person stood up. Then another. Then another. One by one, people began sharing stories. Small cruelties, they'd witnessed violence, they'd ignored pleas for help, they'd turned away from. The poker buddy tried to shout them down, but he was drowned out by the wave of confession and guilt. "This town failed you," the gray-haired woman said, looking at Clara and Margaret. "We all knew, and we all looked away. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "It's not too late to make it right. The judge arrives tomorrow. If he sides with Evelyn Simmons, if he decides Jake committed murder instead of self-defense, an innocent man will hang. Please, Please don't let that happen." "What can we do?" someone called out. "Tell the truth. Tell Judge Anderson what you just told this room. Tell him what kind of man Richard Simmons really was." Clara looked at each face in the crowd. Or stay silent and let evil win again. The church erupted in voices, people arguing, crying, making promises. Clara felt Jake's arm around her waist, steady and strong. "You did it," he murmured. "You really did it." "We did it," Clara corrected. "Together." But the door burst open, and Evelyn Simmons stood there with Tommy and 3 hired guns. The church went dead silent. "How touching," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with contempt. "A room full of cowards finding their courage 25 years too late." She walked down the aisle like she owned it. "But courage doesn't change the law. And the law says my brother's estate belongs to his next of kin, unless that next of kin chooses to sign it over to someone else." "I'm not signing anything," Clara said. "Then Mr. Carter hangs tomorrow." Evelyn smiled. "Judge Anderson and I had a lovely dinner this evening. We discussed the case at length. He's very concerned about drifters who seduce young women and murder their fathers. Very concerned indeed." "You bought him," Jake said flatly. "I prefer to think of it as influencing his perspective." Evelyn pulled out the document again. "Last chance, Clara, dear. Sign this, or watch your lover die." Clara looked at the paper, then at Jake, then at her mother. Margaret's face was pale but determined. She gave Clara a small nod. "No," Clara said. Evelyn's eyes flashed with rage. "You stupid little girl. I'm not a girl anymore. I'm a woman who's done being bullied by people like you." Clara stepped forward. "You want the ranch, the money, fine. Take it. It's all blood money anyway, built on suffering and cruelty. But you're not getting it through blackmail. You're not getting it by threatening the man I love." "Then how do you propose I get it?" "You don't." Clara turned to the crowd. "Everything Richard Simmons owned came from exploiting workers, cheating business partners, and violence. That ranch was built by men he underpaid and abused. That money came from deals he made through threats and intimidation. Does anyone here think Evelyn Simmons deserves to profit from that?" "No." Several people shouted. "Then here's what I propose." Clara's heart was pounding, but her voice was clear. "I'll sign over the estate not to Evelyn, but to a trust. A trust that will compensate every person Richard Simmons ever cheated or hurt. Every worker he underpaid. Every business he destroyed. Every family he terrorized. The money will go back to the people it was stolen from." Evelyn's face went purple. "You can't do that. Watch me. I'm Richard Simmons' heir. The estate is mine to do with as I please." Clara looked at Phillips. "Doctor, you're a man of standing in this community. Will you help me set up such a trust?" "It would be my honor," Phillips said. "This is insane." Evelyn turned to the crowd. "You're going to let this girl throw away a fortune." "Better thrown away than given to you," the gray-haired woman said. "You're just like your brother, greedy and cruel." "How dare you?" "She dares because it's true," Margaret said. She was standing now, her dress buttoned back up her shoulders straight. "I met you once, Evelyn, at Richard's and my wedding. You told me I was marrying above my station, that I should be grateful Richard was willing to take damaged goods. Do you remember that?" Evelyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I was 18 years old," Margaret continued, "and you made me feel like dirt. Now I'm 43, and I've survived things you can't imagine. And I'm here to tell you you're not getting 1 penny of blood money, not from my daughter, not while I'm alive." The church erupted in applause. Evelyn looked around wildly, her control slipping. "You'll regret this. All of you when Judge Anderson rules tomorrow." "Judge Anderson will do what's right," came a voice from the back of the church. Everyone turned to see the sheriff standing in the doorway, and next to him was a tall man with white hair and stern features. "Isn't that right, Your Honor?" Judge Anderson stepped into the church, his face grave. "I heard there was a community meeting tonight. Thought I'd arrive early and see what all the fuss was about." Evelyn went white. "Your Honor, I can explain." "Can you?" Because from where I'm standing, I just heard you attempt to extort a young woman by threatening to influence my decision in a murder trial. Anderson's voice was ice cold. That's a serious crime, Mrs. Simmons. It was a misunderstanding. Was dinner last night a misunderstanding too? The dinner where you offered me $10,000 to rule against Mr. Carter. Anderson looked at the crowd. I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen corruption, bribery, intimidation. But I've never seen someone foolish enough to attempt it right in front of me. You weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow. Lucky for Mr. Carter that I caught an early train. Anderson turned to Jake. Mr. Carter, I've heard testimony from multiple witnesses tonight. I've seen evidence of systematic abuse, and I've witnessed Mrs. Evelyn Simmons attempt to pervert the course of justice. Based on all that I'm ruling, this matter settled. Richard Simmons' death was justifiable homicide in defense of his daughter's life. You're a free man. The church exploded. People cheered, cried, embraced each other. Clara felt her knees buckle, and Jake caught her, spinning her around in his arms. You're free, Clara sobbed. You're free. We're free, Jake corrected, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. All of us. But Anderson wasn't finished. As for you, Mrs. Simmons, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a public official. Sheriff Morrison, if you please. Morrison stepped forward and took Evelyn's arm. She tried to jerk away, but he held firm. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, ma'am. You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have money. You have the right to remain silent, Morrison said. I suggest you use it. As they dragged Evelyn out, she looked back at Clara with pure hatred. This isn't over. I'll fight you for that estate. I'll tie it up in courts for years. Good luck with that from a jail cell, Clara said. And then, because she couldn't help herself, she smiled. Goodbye, Evelyn. Enjoy paying for your brother's sins. When the door closed behind them, the church erupted again. The gray-haired woman pulled Clara into a fierce hug. You're so brave. So incredibly brave. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared. That's what brave is, honey. Doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. The woman pulled back and looked at Clara. My name's Ruth Henderson. My husband owns the hotel in town. You and your mother are welcome to stay there as long as you need. No charge. We can't accept. You can and you will. It's the least we can do after failing you for so long. Ruth looked at the crowd. In fact, I think everyone here owes you something. So here's what I propose we help Clara set up that trust she mentioned. We track down everyone Richard Simmons hurt and make sure they're compensated. And we make sure nothing like this ever happens in Silver Creek again. The crowd roared approval. People started making plans, offering help, pledging money and time and support. Clara watched it all in a daze, unable to process that these strangers, these people who owed her nothing, were rallying around her. Is this real? She asked Jake. It's real. Jake's arms tightened around her. You changed everything tonight, Clara. You took your pain and turned it into something good. Something that'll help people for years to come. We changed it. You, me, Mama. All of us. Margaret appeared beside them, Ruth helping support her. Judge Anderson wants to speak with us. About the estate. They followed Anderson to a quiet corner of the church. He pulled out a notebook and a pen. Miss Clara, what you proposed tonight. The trust, it's a noble idea, but it's also complicated. You'll need lawyers, administrators, documentation of every claim. It could take years. I have years, Clara said. And I have help. She gestured to the crowd of people still making plans. We'll figure it out together. Anderson studied her face. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A victim. Someone broken and helpless. Anderson's expression softened. But you're neither of those things, are you? I was. For a long time. But not anymore. Clara looked at Jake, at her mother, at Ruth and Phillips, and all the faces of people who'd stood up when it mattered. I learned something tonight. Victims are made by people who choose to hurt them, but they're also unmade by people who choose to help them. and I've had enough help to become something else." "What's that?" "A survivor, and maybe eventually just Clara. Not Richard Simmons' daughter, not a victim, just me." Anderson smiled, the first genuine smile Clara had seen from him. "I think you'll do just fine, Miss Clara. I'll send some lawyers to help with the trust. Good ones who work for justice, not money." "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me. You did the hard part." Anderson tipped his hat. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some paperwork to file about Mrs. Evelyn Simmons. She won't be bothering you again for a very long time." When he left, Clara finally let herself breathe. The tension that had been coiled in her chest for 2 days for 23 years finally released. She sagged against Jake, and he held her up like he'd been doing since the moment they met. "What happens now?" Margaret asked quietly. "Now we live," Clara said. "We build that trust. We help people. We start over." "Where?" Clara looked around the church at the town visible through the windows at the mountains beyond. "Maybe here. Silver Creek seems like a good place to call home." "And us?" Jake asked, his voice low. "What happens with us?" Clara turned to face him fully. In the lamplight, his eyes were warm and steady and full of something that made her heart race. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" "I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a home with you, have children with you if you want them. Grow old watching you be the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known." Jake took her hands. "I want everything, Clara, if you'll have me." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but these were happy tears, the first happy tears she could remember crying. Yes, yes to all of it. To mornings and homes and children and growing old. To everything. Jake kissed her, then right there in front of her mother and half the town, and Clara didn't care who saw. She kissed him back, pouring everything into it, gratitude and love and hope and promise. When they finally broke apart, Margaret was crying too, smiling through her tears. "I never thought I'd see this day. My daughter happy, free, loved." "What about you, Mama?" Clara asked. "What do you want?" Margaret thought about it. "I want to help with the trust. I want to make sure Richard's victims get justice. And then..." She paused, looking almost embarrassed. "I want to learn who Margaret is. Not Margaret Simmons, not anyone's wife or mother, just Margaret." "You'll always be my mother," Clara said. "I know, but I need to be more than that too. I need to find out who I was supposed to be before Richard destroyed me." Margaret squeezed Clara's hand. "Is that selfish?" "It's the opposite of selfish. It's survival." Clara pulled her mother into a hug. "We'll figure it out together, all of it." The next few hours passed in a blur of planning and promises. Ruth set them up in rooms at her hotel. Phillips brought food and fresh bandages for Margaret's arm. People stopped by to offer support, share stories, make amends for years of silence. And through it all, Jake never left Clara's side. He stood with her as she signed the papers Anderson provided, officially creating the trust. He held her when she finally broke down, crying, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. He made her laugh with stories of his travels, painted pictures of the life they could build together. "You know," Jake said as they sat on the hotel porch watching the stars come out. "A week ago I was just a drifter looking for work. Now I'm engaged to the bravest woman in Colorado and helping administer a trust fund. Life's funny." "Engaged?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember you actually asking." Jake grinned and dropped to one knee right there on the porch. "Clara Simmons, will you marry me? I don't have a ring or money or much of anything except a horse and a beat-up saddle. But I have love, more than I knew I was capable of. And if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day earning that brave yes you gave me in the church." "Yes," Clara said through fresh tears. "Yes, yes, yes." Jake stood up and kissed her again, and Clara heard applause from inside the hotel. Ruth must have been watching through the window. Clara didn't care. Let the whole world watch. Let them see what freedom looked like, what love looked like, what choosing yourself looked like. "I have a confession," Jake said when they finally pulled apart. "What?" "When I first saw you in that barn kneeling in the dirt with your father standing over you, I didn't just see someone who needed help. I saw someone who was already fighting, already refusing to break, and I thought there's a woman worth knowing, worth protecting, worth loving. You fell in love with me that fast. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it." Jake brushed a strand of hair from her face. "The love came later. When you stood up to your father in the kitchen, when you rode all night without complaining, when you threw that candlestick at Richard's head, when you spoke in front of the whole town and refused to let Evelyn win. That's when I fell completely hopelessly in love." Clara laughed. "That's a lot of falling for 1 week. When you know, you know." Jake pulled her close. "And I know you're it for me, Clara. The only woman I'll ever want, the only future worth building." "Good," Clara said, resting her head on his chest. "Because you're stuck with me now, for better or worse till death do us part." "Sounds perfect to me." They sat there for a long time wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead. Behind them in the hotel, Margaret was sleeping peacefully for the first time in 25 years. Around them in Silver Creek, a town was waking up to the cost of silence and the power of speaking up. And ahead of them stretched years of work building the trust, helping victims, creating something good from Richard Simmons' legacy of pain. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, Clara was exactly where she wanted to be, in the arms of the man who'd saved her, who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, who'd risked everything for a stranger and gained a love that would last a lifetime. "Jake," Clara said quietly. "Yeah, thank you. For the barn, for the escape, for killing my father, for loving me, for all of it. You don't need to thank me. I do. Because without you, I'd still be trapped, still broken, still convinced I deserved every beating, every cruel word, every moment of suffering. You were never broken, Clara, just bent. And bent things can straighten out with the right support." Clara smiled. "Is that what you are?" "My support. I'm whatever you need me to be. Support partner, lover, friend. Whatever helps you become the woman you were always meant to be." "I think I'm already becoming her," Clara said. "The woman who stood in that church tonight, that's who I really am. Strong, brave, unafraid." "Then my work here is done." "Don't you dare." Clara sat up and looked at him. "Your work is just beginning. We have a life to build together, remember. How could I forget?" Jake pulled her back down. "You, me, and a trust fund full of blood money were turning into something beautiful. Not exactly how I pictured my future. Better or worse than you pictured?" Jake pretended to think about it. "Definitely better. I was planning to die alone in some dusty town, probably shot by a jealous husband or a crooked sheriff. This is much nicer." Clara laughed and the sound startled her. When was the last time she'd laughed like this, free and easy and genuine? She couldn't remember. Maybe never. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I don't think I've actually said it out loud yet, but I do. I love you, Jake Carter. Completely and forever." Jake's expression went soft. "I love you too, Clara Simmons. Soon to be Clara Carter, if you'll take my name." "I will, gladly. Anything to stop being a Simmons." They stayed on that porch until the stars began to fade and dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold. And when they finally went inside to sleep, Clara dreamed not of her father's fists or Richard's rage, but of wildflowers growing in the cracks of rocks reaching for the sun, despite everything trying to keep them down. She woke to find Jake watching her, his expression tender. "Morning, beautiful. Morning." Clara stretched, feeling muscles she'd forgotten she had. "What time is it?" "Early, but I couldn't sleep. Too busy thinking about our future. And I think it's going to be good. Hard sometimes, probably. We've got a lot of work ahead with the trust. But good." Jake traced a finger along her jaw. "As long as we're together, it'll be good." Clara believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed in tomorrow, in possibility, in happy endings. The cowboy's kiss hadn't just been an escape from her father's cruelty, it had been the beginning of everything she'd never dared to dream she could have. "Ready to start living?" Jake asked. Clara smiled, took his hand and held on tight. "I've been ready my whole life. I just needed someone to show me how." And together, in a small hotel in Silver Creek, Colorado, surrounded by people who'd found courage when it mattered most. Clara Simmons began the life she'd fought so hard to claim free loved and finally completely her own.